Great. I'd love to welcome to the stage Sarah Baker, who is going to provide a presentation on bikers. So Sarah, do you wear a helmet when you biker? Sorry. So Sarah, what draws you to bikers, this kind of bikers, generally? Why is this the place that you focused?
Back to the biker's helmet. Hopefully, back up. Hopefully after today, we'll all be part of a biker's gang. So I went into science and material science because I thought materials would be helpful in combating climate change. I wanted to do something about climate change. And what I found at every turn is that the interaction of materials and technologies with biology presents tremendous opportunity. So I started in bikers several years ago, working to develop materials for carbon capture. And then we realized, hey, these would be great materials to capture CO2 from biogas. And then that really expanded into, wow, you can capture CO2 from a whole host of technologies that convert biomass. Hopefully you'll see today how many opportunities exist. All right, so I think we've heard a lot today about bikers as putting waste biomass to work. Putting it to work to remove carbon dioxide from the air to stabilize our climate, putting it to work to make carbon products to displace our use of petroleum products in the future. And finally, bikers can help us deal with waste disposal problems that we have with biomass, as well as reduce pollution in a lot of cases. So the goal of our analysis was really, over the United States, what is the magnitude of opportunity that bikers presents? How much carbon removal can we really get? How much does it cost? And then, of course, what are the real regional opportunities that emerge when we look across the United States? And as we've heard, bikers really can have the potential to be, one of the biggest parts of the solution. Removing at costs less than $100 per ton. When we want to get to that gigaton, bikers could play the predominant role here, but a lot of pieces have to come into place. So we've seen this already. This really just tells what bikers is, using plants and trees to do that hard work of pulling the carbon dioxide out of the air, using solar energy as a driving force. This diagram also shows not just how it works, but all the steps of our analysis. So the types of biomass are forestry, agricultural residues, municipal solid waste, and what we call carbon crops. Of course, that biomass needs to be transported to a conversion facility, so we accounted for the costs and emissions of doing that. In this conversion process, we could make a whole host of products. I think JP showed a number of those products, fuels, building products. Necessarily in that conversion process, carbon dioxide is generated. And so bikers is just taking that carbon dioxide, instead of venting it, in most cases putting it deep underground where it's stored safely out of the atmosphere. And so, of course, we included the costs of these conversion processes. We also included revenue from selling these products, and we took a very conservative approach to what those revenues would be. And then also the cost of moving the carbon dioxide to where it could be stored, and the cost of storing the carbon dioxide. So here it all is in a nutshell. That could be used for bikers. I can't believe I just said that. Okay. So bikers starts at the ground. We did our analysis from the ground up. And so it starts at biomass. So the first thing we did, we actually had two teams. One team looked at the biomass supply. The other team looked at the conversion technologies. And then they met up in the middle to look at the overall impact. So the first guiding principle for us was really, why are we doing this? Carbon removal. So we prioritize carbon removal in all of our decisions about biomass availability. All of the biomass that we looked at would not negatively impact carbon that's already being stored in soils or in forests. Also, we prioritize preserving ecosystems. So we only looked at planting native perennials, and in biodiverse regions, we looked at planting native prairie and harvesting that, which is a really exciting idea. I'd love to see that prairie. Okay, and you can see here the 4 different types of biomass and the different colors that we looked at. California is a bit different than the rest of the country. You can see this enormous green bar up on the west coast there. And that's some original analysis we did on the amount of forest biomass that could be available if we followed what the US Forest Service says that we need to do to remove biomass from the forest to reduce the risk of wildfire. And you can see that the yellow bars are what we call carbon crops. These are purpose-grown crops, and we prioritize carbon, and we also prioritize food production. All of these carbon crops are grown on non-cropland, and that's also to avoid what's called leakage, so where you displace a current crop and then it's grown somewhere else that's detrimental. And so if you add all of this up with all of these guardrails, and this is one of our more conservative assessments, you get about 650 million tons per year of biomass in the United States. Okay, let's zoom in on the Central Valley, and I think probably people here may have even a more accurate idea of what our data show. But these agricultural residues, they are in theory available outside of the current use, and also available outside of what is needed to avoid erosion and to prevent soil carbon loss. And so we can see the Central Valley is really actually quite unique in the United States. Dominated by the purple bars, this is our agricultural residue. And you can see that they're co-located directly on top of the shaded region here, which is geologic storage. So this agricultural residue in the Central Valley comes predominantly from the dairy industry, from rice straw, tree nut residues, cotton and citrus residues. Those are the most prevalent. And you can see Tulare, Kern, Fresno, and Merced are the highest producing counties. And there's also quite a bit of municipal solid waste. And we only included what we call the biogenic portion of that municipal solid waste in our analysis. So it had to originate in plants or trees. So this is wood or paperboard that doesn't get recycled and ends up in a landfill. Okay, so, and I forgot the top line, 10 million tons per year in the Central Valley. So we have to connect with BiCRS. We have to make a lot of connections. We have to connect that biomass to a conversion technology. And we also had some guiding principles on what those conversion technologies or biorefineries would do. First up, we had to be able to have an accurate assessment of costs and how these technologies or biorefineries would perform. And so they have to exist in some form today so that we can do that. We like to say no miracles required. There's no technological breakthrough that's required to make this happen. And also that these biorefineries, when we want to count the carbon that they remove, that it's durably stored. So all of the carbon that we count, we believe there's enough scientific evidence to say that this carbon would be stored out of the atmosphere for at least 100 years. So I'm showing 2 examples. They happen to be gasification facilities, 2 examples of biorefineries that exist. And Phoenix Energy Plant right here near Merced, and a gasification plant in Indiana that's actually converted from coal. The technologies that we looked at, we had to match the type of biomass that was is optimal for the technology. These are thermochemical approaches, so approaches that use heat to break down the biomass. Biological approaches, so approaches that use biological fermentation and anaerobic digestion, microbes to break down the biomass, and then mechanical methods like using a sawmill to make durable products. Okay, so if we make all of these connections and account for all of these costs, we wanted to understand what does a solution look like that maximizes the amount of carbon dioxide removal we can get in the United States at the minimum cost. And this is actually too complicated of a problem for us in 2 years, so we asked the computer to do an optimization. And this is a snapshot of that optimization based on the inputs that we gave it. And of course, there are many, many different solutions to this problem. So all of the symbols on this map are locations of biorefineries. This is where the computer said we would locate biorefineries to minimize the cost. And you can, the symbol itself is a reflection of what type of biorefinery it would be. You could see a lot of these are located over geologic storage. If you look over in the Central Valley, you can see a lot of these biorefineries are triangles. That is gasification to hydrogen. And these biorefineries are accepting biomass from the forests on the West Coast because of the geologic storage here, as well as the agricultural residues here. We believe the model chose gasification to hydrogen because of the geologic storage. If you're making a lot of CO2 per ton of biomass, you don't want to move that carbon dioxide very far. Okay, so all told, time's up. This is 800 million tons of carbon dioxide per year from over 300 biorefineries, also producing these products that will help us meet other goals like hydrogen, electricity, biochar, all at a cost of less than $100 per ton. Last slide. What this shows us is what's possible. It does not tell us how to get there, and BiCRS requires, while it has potentially the highest impact of all the pathways we looked at, it requires the most collaboration. It is the most complex. It requires people to come together. The Central Valley really has those pieces. The Central Valley has agricultural residue that's in excess, and it has a geologic storage, and it has the need to improve air quality. Look forward to learning from all of you. We by no means have all the answers. Want to hear how we can come together and make this happen. Thank you.
All right, and with that, I'd love to welcome our panelists to the stage. Karen Warner, who is founder and CEO of Beam Circular, please come up. Rosie Burrows, who prefers the title matriarch of Burrows Family Farm, please come up. Thea Limberger, who's Wood Utilization Coordinator, Sierra Institute for Community and Environment. Corinne Scown, Deputy Director of Research, Energy Analysis, and Environmental Impacts Division at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And Sarah is already up on stage. All right. So I would love to start with a question about the technology, the conversion step in these pathways. So this is an area where there's often a lot of confusion, because as the point that was made earlier, it used to be the case that we would do combustion, right, with this biomass, and you'd burn it and release a lot you'd release CO2 and other things into the atmosphere, contributing to PM 2.5, et cetera. These conversion processes are different. So I'd love for whoever would like to take this, and then I know we'll get into remarks, but just to sort of set the table here, Maybe, Sarah, you could explain the difference between some of these key conversion processes. So you have combustion, right, which we've talked about. You have gasification, which is something different. And you have pyrolysis, which is maybe the third one. That's and any others that you'd anaerobic digestion, I guess, would be another. Can you just explain what are the differences and what are the emissions that are associated with each one, just in broad strokes to kind of set the table?
Sure. So we talked a lot, I talked a lot about gasification, and I think someone mentioned that's baking instead of burning, and pyrolysis it falls into the same category, but at lower temperatures. And then we have the microbial approaches that, fermentation is a very established way that corn ethanol is produced and used in a lot of our vehicles. And then anaerobic digestion is, very, very well established, done probably on the farms here to break down waste that has high amount of moisture. That's one of the key parameters that when we want to link the biomass to the type of conversion technology, moisture content is the biggest one. So with these thermochemical approaches, you don't want a lot of moisture in the biomass. If you use anaerobic digestion, you can tolerate a lot of moisture. So that's just a little bit more in depth than what I said before.
Great. So Corinne, I'd love to ask you, you were the lead author on the report's cross-cutting chapter, analyzing the benefits and implications of large-scale carbon removal with these processes. Tell us about those findings. So when we do deploy bikers at the scales that we're talking about, which are massive, right? What are the benefits of doing that go beyond CO2 removal?
Sure. And I won't just talk about the benefits. I will talk about the good
Thank you. Yes.
and the bad.
Good, the bad, and the ugly.
And the ugly. Okay. So we looked primarily at like land area, water, and air quality impacts. And I know all of those things are kind of near and dear to people's hearts in California. Across all the different CDR technologies, the big drivers for land area are not like the facilities themselves. Their land footprint is pretty small. So it's primarily land that you're gonna like cultivate differently. So that would be like dedicated energy crops. As we already talked about, we didn't really model that for California, right? It doesn't make sense to take this like incredibly valuable land and instead of growing melons, grow switchgrass. Like, it's just the value proposition is in other regions. The other land footprint is renewables. And that can be a little complicated because the renewable energy generation for DACs, which I know you guys will hear more about later, can be co-located with other things. So you could have agricultural production, and then you also have wind turbines on there, and that is providing energy to power a DACs facility. So even though the land footprint looks pretty big for some of the DACs pieces of the analysis, you're kind of like double dipping. You can also do other things with some of that land. So I'd say like the land footprint in general for California for doing CDR was not particularly large. That was not the big like headline for this region. So for water, yeah, I mean, water's a concern. Anytime you build a new facility that requires water, you have to be mindful of where that water is going to come from and if there's going to be enough, and if you are, taking water resources from somebody else who really needs it. And so in the case of these facilities, the primary way that you use water is if you need cooling. And all the different configurations need sort of varying amounts of cooling. One of the things this gets into, and this is kind of like in the weeds, is if you need energy on site, especially if you don't have grid access, how are you going to generate it? So there may be a portion of the biomass that you need to like gasify and then burn that syngas or something just so that you can provide like the electricity, the heat needs for the facility. So there may be some amount of energy generation on site, and that may or may not require, some substantial amounts of cooling water.
And Corinne, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to clarify, when you say you considered all of these things, are these things were all inputs into where you determined these facilities should go? Is that correct?
Yeah, so one of the really nice things about the BiCRS analysis is that they actually had stream flow constraints built in that limited where you could site these facilities. The other thing that we did kind of on the back end was take the optimization results that came out from the BiCRS chapter, attach water consumption values to those, and then we aligned those with where we're projected to see increased frequency of water shortages under climate change. And so we have these really nice maps that show kind of like where it's like high water shortage frequency and high water demands, or like medium and medium, or low and low, or like low and high. So you can kind of see like where the concerns are. The good news about BiCRS is that the potential is like really spread out. There's a lot of places across the US that can participate in BiCRS. For DAX, it was actually a little more concentrated in some of the places where we worry about water constraints. We'll talk about that later. But in California, it was kind of like middling, both in terms of the total potential and also in terms of the water concerns. And then for air quality, the really interesting thing about these facilities that are doing carbon removal is that you can also end up capturing a good fraction of the air pollutants that would otherwise get emitted if you were just doing like bioenergy generation and burning syngas or something. And so in general, we expect CDR to have like a largely positive impact on air quality. The other thing I should mention is the other stuff you can do with this biomass is not zero emission from an air quality standpoint, right? Like composting has substantial emissions. Yeah, in terms of the air quality impacts, the big question mark that we still have to do some research to answer is like, with these different configurations and different solvents that you might use for carbon capture and sequestration, if you're doing some like post-combustion capture, is like what's happening with those solvents? Is a little bit of them thermally degrading? What is it degrading
Corinne,
to? Yeah.
Take that up one level. So what are you talking about?
Thank you for keeping me honest here. Yeah. So some of these facilities will produce a concentrated carbon dioxide stream like right out of the gate, right? If you do fermentation to ethanol, that is an anaerobic process. So you don't put air in and you get like a pretty pure CO2 stream. In fact, some of those facilities sell their CO2 for like beverage manufacturing, right? It's pretty pure. That's like low-hanging fruit, carbon removal kind of stuff. Some of these facilities may be gasifying biomass, and you may have a stream that's got like some other stuff in it. If you have a post-combustion stream, let's say you're combusting some of the biomass to provide energy for your facility, so you're burning it. And then the gas that you have at the end of that process, if you want to do carbon capture and sequestration on that, you have to separate the CO2 from everything else that's in that gas. And so there are different ways to do that, but if you're using a like liquid solvent, like something that you use to sort of scrub out the CO2 from everything else, the air quality impacts of operating those systems is still a little bit uncertain. We think it's going to be a big improvement over not using those systems and just emitting the pollutants, but we want to make sure we understand what comes out of that. Like, what is the mass balance? What, does a little bit of the solvent degrade? So that's where the uncertainty is.
Thanks, Corinne. I'd love to actually start to include some of the people in the audience who actually have projects that are doing the things that we're talking about today. And I'd love to pick on Josh Stolaroff, who's CEO of Moat right now. There you are. Let's give him a microphone. So Josh, tell us about Moat. You're gasifying biomass, like we've heard about, and you intend to produce hydrogen and store the CO2 that you capture from the facility. So tell us, what magnitude are we talking about? Where do you get this biomass? How much of it? Give us some of those details.
Sure, thanks. So I'm Josh Stolaroff, CEO of Merced, and we turn waste biomass into hydrogen and CO2 for underground storage. This company was inspired by the work that I did on the precursor to this report, the Getting to Neutral report for California, where we found that the best thing to do with waste biomass was gasify it to hydrogen and store the CO2. This makes sense where you have geologic CO2 storage possibilities, which we have great ones in the Central Valley. So we have two projects in development, one near Bakersfield, one near Sacramento, And these are large-scale facilities. And that's something that you have to do if you want to make CO2 for geologic storage. You have
How
to,
large scale?
yeah. And 400,000 tons a year of CO2 stored.
And how much biomass would be in one of those facilities would you be taking in per year?
The input is about 900 tons a day of biomass, which is similar to what you get for a 50 megawatt power plant, which we have a few of in California.
Several 100,000 tons, about 300,000 tons a year of biomass out of that 10 million tons a year of available biomass that we heard about existing in this region, just to give some sense of that scale. So very interesting. So I'd love to continue with our panel here. So Karen, I wonder if you could tell us about Beam Circular and what it is and how what you're doing relates to bikers that we're hearing about today.
Great. Awesome. I'm just so delighted to be here, and I'm learning a ton. I want to start by saying that I am not the technical expert in the room. Our work is really grounded in place-based and community-centered solutions that meet the needs and the vision of local communities as we think about a more sustainable and vibrant and inclusive future. Beam Circular is a cross-sector collaboration here in the North San Joaquin Valley of California. We're anchored in San Joaquin, Stanislaus, and Merced counties that's advancing the circular bioeconomy. BEAM stands for Bioeconomy, Agriculture, and Manufacturing. And we were launched a year ago coming out of community-driven planning around what we want our future economy to look like. And one of my favorite things about this conversation and the approach to this report is the place-based aspect of this and the recognition that there are going to be different solutions across the country. There are going to be different solutions. We must have tailored solutions that align with each of our different regions. And what we identified here in this region through collaborative conversations with business and community members and educators and the government is that we have an incredible opportunity to lead in the growth of solutions that transform waste, especially from the food and agricultural system that is so vibrant and important in this region, and transform that waste into valuable, useful products that we use every day. Whether that's in the energy space, or if that's materials, chemicals, agricultural inputs, or food products as well, that can use the power of biology to produce more sustainable goods. And we're really interested in, I know the focus today is really about carbon removal, but I'm really excited about the opportunity to also play in the mitigation landscape of how are we diverting emissions as well as opening up opportunities for removal. And in this space of the conversion step, there's opportunities to do both because we can make energy or we can make bio-based plastics or bio-based, dyes that are used in the fashion industry and probably on most of us around the room, fibers, construction materials, food and nutrition products, organic soil amendments, things that are replacing and diverting the use of petrochemicals and fossil fuels and replacing really high polluting manufacturing processes with greener processes. So what we're doing is we're bringing together the different pieces across sectors to create the enabling environment to scale the really important innovations and solutions in the bioeconomy up. And I want to, in coming back to place, the Central Valley really is uniquely suited to lead. California is the leading state in agriculture and manufacturing and biotechnology. The North San Joaquin Valley is the only place in the entire country that combines the top level of ag production by volume, the top level concentration of manufacturing activities. We forget that Stanislaus and Merced counties in particular have the highest concentration of manufacturing activities in the state of California and among the highest in the country because we are global leaders in food processing and food manufacturing. There are extraordinarily exciting workforce and labor adjacencies. Hi, Secretary Ross, who's been such a wonderful collaborator in this work. Infrastructure, supply chain assets relevant to the type of conversion and manufacturing operations that are relevant to this conversation and enabling of bikers. There are incredible things that make us really specialized for this type of sector growth. We know that the majority of families in this region struggle to make ends meet because we have a shortage of quality jobs. Most of those struggling families have at least one working adult in the household. So the dynamics in this deeply disinvested region, which I love because I grew up here and I'm raising my own kids here in the Central Valley, is that we need access to quality jobs and jobs that don't make us sick, and that are advancing the solutions that benefit all of us through cleaner water and air. We have to have the right enabling infrastructure to do that. We have to have connections that are appropriate and targeted to connect feedstock suppliers. So the sources of this biomass are farmers and our growers and our food manufacturers and our municipalities who are managing green waste. We have to be able to connect the dots between those feedstock sources and the ways that we can utilize these residues in ways that reduce water and air pollution and create these quality, valuable products and open up opportunities for carbon removal. So we're thinking about the ways that we can advance that and creating really a global center of excellence and innovation by combining partnerships across sectors.
Thank you, Karen. So we've heard about the different forms of bikers. We've heard about DAC. We've heard about different ways of capturing the CO2. And Karen, to your point, one of the things that the critical piece here is the interconnections ultimately to what to do with that CO2. And so I want to actually turn to two companies in the audience that are actively developing those storage sites for that CO2 underground. And I'd like to hear from them and tell us a little bit about what these projects are and what they're seeing in terms of the processes and companies that will be providing CO2 to be stored underground. So I'll start with actually Jonathan Dethloff. If you could tell us a little bit about what Era Energy is doing when it comes to CO2 storage and enabling the technologies that we've talked about. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, James. So I'm Jonathan Dethloff with Era Energy. We are a California oil and gas producer with the bulk of our operations in Kern County. We are currently in the process of permitting our Carbon Frontier project, which would have the ability to store up to 27 million tons of CO2 in Kern County from potentially our own operations, from direct air capture. We recently were selected for a DAC grant from the DOE, from BiCRS, and from other sources of CO2 to help California meet its climate goals.
And so how much CO2 do you have line of sight to right now with your project to store underground? If you can share that.
Yeah, so the permits we're pursuing are for 1.5 to 3 million tons of CO2. Right now, not all of that is subscribed, I guess, if you will, but I mean, we are in talks with a number of different entities that are interested in providing that CO2. And I think as this entire conference is showing, there's potential for more. So we're looking at additional pore space, additional to take on more CO2 to help California meet its needs.
Thank you. I'd like to go to to Chris Gould. Is he here? Oh, great, Chris. So tell us about CRC and the carbon storage project that you are leading.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Nice to see our colleagues here from ERA. We're neighbors. We've just announced a deal, so you'll be talking to kind of both of us hopefully soon. But I lead Carbon TerraVault, which is a subsidiary of CRC. I'm here to say that this is a great event and provides some proof points around not only the geologic sequestration piece, but also BiCRS, direct air capture, all the things that were just mentioned. So we are advancing just shy of 200 million tons of storage in the Central Valley. We've submitted our first permit to do that about 2.5 years ago, and in fact, our public hearing with the EPA was just this week. So we're on the cusp of moving the first of those forward. 200 million tons is roughly 5 to 7 million tons per annum of injection capacity. So it's absolutely correct that these are world-class locations for geologic sequestration. In terms of bikers, we do have 4 projects that we're advancing that use a combination of all the feedstocks that were mentioned: forest waste, agriculture waste, and municipal waste, with the technologies that are being discussed up here. And they're going to produce products including renewable natural gas that can go into the utility gas grid. They're going to produce renewable hydrogen. They're going to produce renewable drop-in diesel and gasoline. So it's a fantastic way to advance on this transition. That is just under 1 million tons per annum from those emission sources, bikers specifically. And then, of course, we're participating in the direct air capture hub as well for that part of removal.
So, Chris, one question, and we'll get right back to the panel. So, as quick as possible, I'd love to just understand, and you know, for everyone, how hard is it to do this when it comes to injecting millions of tons of CO2 underground? It sounds hard. Give us a sense of, you know, what goes into something like that to be able to actually start to do that.
Yeah.
A sense of cost, sense of who do you need, human capital, those sorts of things.
Yeah, so we are a oil and gas producer. The parent company is CRC. So what we have done is, or the strategy we've taken is repurposing oil and gas reservoirs that are depleted, or saline reservoirs, or mineralization. There's all sorts of ways to do this. And essentially repurposing not only those assets, but the skills, the subsurface skills of the employees, the technical teams, the permitting teams that were previously permitting for extraction are now can be repurposed to permitting for CO2 injection. It's very complex, right? You have to have an understanding of the data and the subsurface characteristics that, you know, will enable sequestration. It's the permitting process is lengthy and robust, and you have to be prepared to do that.
Thank you, Chris. Back to our panel. Thea, I'd love for you to share what you're doing at the Sierra Institute when it comes to bikers, and go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. So at the Sierra Institute, we're doing a number of things from a biker standpoint, but actually I'd like to take a step back and say we purchased a 28-acre site that is a former sawmill site that had need for a lot of remediation. So that was around 6 years, roughly $3 million to even get bikers pathways to be possible. In our region, we're in Plumas County with the Sierra Institute. That is about 5 hours from here, around 2 hours from Chico, in the Plumas National Forest. There's not a lot of sites available for heavy industrial use for these pathways to happen. So identifying those sites, going through brownfields remediation grants, and that sort of thing was very important for us. And then from a biker's pathway, what we're looking at is biomass to hydrogen with carbon capture and storage. And like it's been mentioned from some of the other great scientists here, it's very important that the biomass doesn't go very far, it doesn't travel very far. So as we've said, there's a lot of the good geologic storage sites are here in the Central Valley. So we are actively working with some of these storage companies to identify additional sites that are closer in proximity to account for some of those hauling emissions that would be taking place for transport and whatnot. So definitely working with those storage companies. In other words, what Chris was saying is you cannot write off the oil and gas companies because their skills will be very important for the new carbon economy going forward. So yeah, I think those are the three main things. And then from a community standpoint, similar to what Karen was saying, the Sierra Institute is community first. Since its inception, we've been bringing rural voices into national resource and policy for many years. So different to what Moat is doing, and Josh spoke, we're a lot smaller scale. we're at more of a community scale, and that's how we define that is really the biocapacity of the landscape. So what is around our community, what biomass is available, and what does our community have in workforce and in the biophysical side, what's actually available to process. So we're about 2 to 3 times smaller than what Moat is trying to do, and we are in the permitting, kind of development stage right now of our project. So we will be, looking forward to demonstrating different scales that this could work from a carbon storage standpoint, from BiCRS, economic standpoint at the community level.
Great, thank you. I want to go to one more project, and then we're going to hear from Rosie Burrows. George Paredes? George. So tell us about the company that you're working at now, and tell us about Zuko 2, Pelican, and the CO2 removal potential of your plans.
Sure, thank you, James, and hi, everybody. My name is George Paredes. I was also another Lawrence Livermore Lab alumnus, along with Josh, who left to try and put some real CO2 back into the ground.
And Julio, don't forget Julio.
Of course. Julio is the mothership of all carbon removal. He wrangles nonstop. So we're based in the California Delta in the vicinity of Stockton. The idea for the project was born when we looked at the unique geology that is inherent in the region, that is very suitable for storing CO2 for very long periods of time, permanently, and also the unique land ownership in the Delta, because you have large tracts of land, large islands in the hands of very few owners, and same for the minerals. So the idea was born for a project. I was very fortunate to join the team just a few months ago, and we think that we can put upward of 100 millitons of CO2 underground. And the way that we are different, or maybe even unique, is that we are wholly founded and owned by local community members, local landowners, local farmers. And our mission is not just to put carbon underground and to help climate change, but to demonstrate in a real life project that this class of activity, BiCRS and carbon removal, can help both the climate and the local host communities.
So where are you getting your carbon from?
We have a large variety of sources that are interested. Some are BiCRS projects, some are existing biorefineries. We have cement plants who are looking to transport the CO2 to us. We have direct air capture companies that are looking to co-locate and/or send CO2 to us. So the entire universe, I think, of budding California industry on the side of carbon management is looking for an outlet or a sequestration site that we can provide.
Thanks, George. I'd love to turn to Rosie. I know you have a few slides. So tell us about the work that you do, your farming operation, and the various activities that we know pertain to carbon storage.
Good morning. Before I begin and tell you about our family farm legacy, I'd like to thank all of the sponsors and all of the people who put this event on. When I first got asked to speak, I was happy to share our farm family story. But as I learned more about this project, I became elated about being here today. So what do I have to bring to the table about what we're talking about with water, carbon, and climate change? I was happy to see that the scientists found that farming was up on the top of their list. So with that, my husband and I, Ward, have been farming here in Merced County for about 50 years. So this is our 50th wedding anniversary as well. Thank you. Our family legacy spans over 130 years here in California, starting in the Berkeley Hills with a dairy that then moved to the Delta and now relocated into Merced County just 50 years ago. Okay, so here is the, on the top left picture is a picture of our farm back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and we were grazing on native pasture. To the right is our current family that we farm with our children here in Merced County. And then our family name that we sell our products is Bros Family Farms. Oh, something must really be wrong with the slides. Anyway, the future is why we're here, and our grandchildren and those of us here today, it's all about making sure we have a planet here to live on for the future. With that, then I wanted to share our regenerative practices. So all of our farms here in California and in Oregon are certified organic. We became the first certified regenerative almond farm in the world. We farm over 1,000 acres of almonds, walnuts, and trees. Together, collectively, our farms are almonds, beef, chickens, eggs. We now no longer have dairies because our food system is broken and we have not been paid what it costs us to produce our products. So with that, I wanted to lead into, I'm just gonna let the slides do whatever they're doing, but I feel like the most important resource we have on the planet for life is water. JP mentioned it yesterday and today, that water is the source of life. Farming depends on water, whether it's coming from the rain or irrigation. But we as stewards, it's our responsibility to protect and preserve the resources that we've been entrusted with. So on the top picture, that is a picture of our almond orchard. And we're using principles, and I don't think it's so important so much right now to talk about all the principles that are involved with agriculture. It was mentioned cover cropping and no-till. And we've used these practices now for over 20 years and 40 years of management intensive grazing. But what's important to know is that cover crops, if they're diversified and they're allowed to live, feed the microbes in the soil. So in terms of numbers, 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, there are more microbes than people on the planet. I spoke here right after UC Merced was built, and I was part of a panel for Symphony of the Soil. I don't know if any of you here saw that video, but it was exquisite in describing soil from around the world. And what we forget is that right beneath our feet is the answer to the problems that we have today. So with keeping soil covered and with the practices of a diversified cover crop, we're saying that now our farming practices, it's a paradigm shift, and it's difficult to grasp that concept. How can you even grasp, the millions of microbes in a teaspoon of healthy soil? But we are all connected, we are all interconnected, and we are farming, mimicking Mother Nature as God intended. With that, our family has been part of many projects, and there are many of you here today that we've also been involved with. I wanted to put a shout out to the Center for Regenerative Ag and Resilient Systems at Chico State, the Ichthyosis Foundation, who's been doing research on our farm and has the longest running research about the difference between regenerative and conventional farms. And in the study that was published last year, 6 times more water was being able to infiltrate into our farms collectively that were regenerative versus the conventional farms. So if we can capture every bit of water that is coming with the rain, we are really making a big difference in our water drawdown that we have. If we can start, instead of farmland retirement, think about farmland working lands where we're using cover crops with the rain to feed the biology in the soil. That's the key, is feeding the biology. I'm really happy to hear that it was acknowledged that cover crops protect the soil from erosion, but it does much more. If we can change the paradigm of what we're currently using to cover cropping, we can change the temperature that's happening in our state. Covering the soil protects the microbes, but it also takes care of the temperature in the soil, whether it's extreme heat or extreme cold. And regenerative practices have a symbiotic relationship with the microbes to be able to protect the plant during extreme weather patterns. Let's see, I'm going to go now and talk about health. So our goal at our farm on any decision that's made is primary and at the top, soil health. So today, many of you know people that have had cancer or have had severe illnesses, but we need to think about the planet as well. It was mentioned that the planet has a fever right now. It's getting hot. And with that fever, then we need to look at what are the ways that we can work with creating health. The cover crops with no-till, those are the two top ones. There are many, many more, but we can make things change. We found in the study as well that not only could we infiltrate more water, we could hold more water, but we also had a big benefit to the microbes in the soil as well as the biodiversity just under the ground. So there's been a lot of numbers thrown around today, and the only one I want to share with you about in terms of numbers are that when you go from conventional farming to regenerative farming and you start increasing the organic matter, 1% of organic matter per acre allows the soil to be able to hold 25,000 gallons of water. So on our farm alone, we've gone from where our organic matter has been increasing, and 25 million gallons more water over our 1,000 acres are collected by our practices. So on these pictures, we've also talked about hedgerows. I've been working on hedgerow projects for over 20 years. And hedgerows not only are beautiful in the fact that we're creating habitat for beneficials like the monarch butterflies, but many people do not realize that if we lost our beneficials, our food supply would drop within 3 months or less. So we're on a tipping point, and we need to support all the farmers, and thanks to the Healthy Soils initiatives that our California state has been helping our farmers, but we really need to make sure that we're embracing, as consumers, purchasing food from regenerative farmers, because if we lose our farmers, we've lost our source of food and our greatest resource we have on the nation. If you come to our farm and you look at the difference between a regenerative farm and an organic farm or a conventional farm, you're going to use all your senses to experience our farm. And the first thing would be using your sight. You're going to see color and the vibrantness of the color, because the microbes are providing every nutrient needed for the plant life. You're going to be able to hear the birds and the beneficials and the buzzing. If you can just imagine butterflies and all the humming and buzzing of all the life that's flying around in the orchards. And when you walk on our farms, you're going to find that when you walk, you're walking on the sponge, that sponge that's holding more water for a longer period of time so that farmers can use less water. And then you're also going to feel it. Everything in life has a vibration. I don't know if you got to watch the Avatar movie, but you know, every time he touched a plant, you could feel those vibrations. And I felt that that was very beautiful, because we can't see what's happening in terms of health and life on our planet. But you're going to feel it with your heart as well. And when you taste nutrient-dense food, you're going to taste the high brick levels that you have. And I have people eat grass or taste grass or the clovers, and they're going to be sweet tasting and delicious. But I leave you with food is medicine. So if you're eating nutrient-dense food, you are going to be feeding your body medicine, health, and health is what makes this planet go. So from the microbes in the soil to the birds in the air, all life benefits from regenerative practices. Thank you.
Thank you.